Hi class, today we're going to be going over macromolecules, which should be familiar to you guys because we talked about it a little bit today in class and from regular biology. So there's going to be some finer points of detail that you'll want to pay attention to, as well as just reviewing everything from before. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So as we know, carbon is super important because it can form these long chains. And not only does it take on this two-dimensional structure, but we can branch out, we can curl around, we can even make rings here, and there's just a ton of variety, which gives all the uniqueness of life about it and the ability to adapt to changing conditions on Earth. So let's keep going. And so this word polymer, poly just means many, right? So many means it's just a bunch of molecules linked together, okay? So the polymer is the big chain, and each single ring would be the monomer, okay? And so let's talk about how these big chains are made, all right? And pretty much any type of polymer that we're making, they're all gonna grow the same way. So they're all gonna the monomers are gonna get put on the same exact way. Whether that's a carbohydrate or protein, it doesn't matter. And generally speaking, you'll see an OH at the end of one and a hydrogen at the end of the other. And so if we're putting these together, if we're building, it's called a dehydration reaction. So this is a building process, okay? So building happens through dehydration. And so you can see that this hydrogen, this OH, they're going to come off in the form of water. So that kind of makes sense. We're dehydrating these molecules, right? And we often call this not necessarily a dehydration reaction, but sometimes we say this is dehydration synthesis because we're making something. All right, now the opposite of that is hydrolysis. So going the opposite direction, we're going to have to put water in. So the opposite way, this water would come between this bond right here, and we would lop this out and put that hydrogen back and put that hydroxide back on there. All right, so hydrolysis is a breakdown. Okay, so the fancy word for building and breakdown are the following. Building is an anabolic process. Breakdown is a catabolic process. And if you're wondering where all this goes in your notebook, by the way, you're just taking these notes on your own. At the point where you see diagrams like the ones that I passed out in class, you can go ahead and paste those in or take notes on top of them and see where you'd like those to go into your notebook, okay? All right, so let's start with the first one. You should have a sheet of glucose molecules and other carbohydrate molecules. So you can go ahead and paste that on the next available page. So if this is your notebook, you're going to want to put that printout on this side. So that way, if you need to point out things and write on this side, you can do so in your notebook, okay? And save the other sheet for subsequent pages. Okay, so my favorite macromolecule is carbs because they taste so good. And they're sweet things, they're French fries things, they're starchy things, bready, pasta, all the good stuff you can think of. We're starting to find out that carbohydrates might not be so good for our waistline. So a lot of people are starting to cut those out because carbohydrates are our main source of energy. So they give us 4 calories for every gram, roughly. So this can be different for different people. So it just depends. Now, this is the #1 thing that we're going to use carbohydrates for. So most of the carbohydrates go into giving you energy. Now, if you don't need energy, if you're a couch potato and you're not doing anything, then these carbohydrate molecules are going to get converted to fat, and you're going to store that fat, all right? But otherwise, lots of energy. Okay, now as far as in the cell goes, there are another place that we really find really important carbohydrates, and that is on the cell surface. And these are proteins. And if you can see on the surface, these are the carbohydrates. Okay, so these are kind of like chains of sugar here. And you can see they each look different, all right? And depending on that physical shape, they mean a different thing. So the immune system is going to look for cells that say, destroy me, right? So if this cell is infected by a virus, it's going to put up this little carbohydrate molecule. It's going to match with a protein on the immune cell, and those are going to match together, and something magical is going to happen inside the cell and will destroy that infected cell. Okay, so together a carbohydrate and a protein is called a glycoprotein. All right, so glycoproteins help to mark the cell surface. All right, and it helps for cells to communicate with each other as well. All right, so those are all the two major functions of carbohydrates, all right? Okay, so let's look at the structure. Like we said in class, carbohydrates are ring structures, okay? So if you're looking at a molecule, you're going to look for a ring, okay? You're going to look that there's an oxygen inside the ring. All carbohydrates have this in common. Okay, and you're going to look for only carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen only. So you're not going to see sulfur, you're not going to see nitrogen, you're not going to see any of that stuff. All right, you're just going to see a ring, usually either 6 or 5 sides. All right, so we have glucose, galactose, fructose. This is the one that's in fruit. Glucose is the one that the mitochondria uses very often to make energy. And everything else just gets converted into glucose, so we can burn that up in the mitochondria for energy. All right, now these are monosaccharides. Mono means single or one. So a saccharide just means a sugar. Okay, and when these things hit our tongue, they taste sweet. When we put sugars together in a polymer, though, they don't taste very sweet. So these simple sugars are great. The reason they taste sweet is over evolution, our bodies have learned to look for these things because they're going to give us the easiest source of energy. All right? In nature, they're hard to come by, but, you know, with modern technology, they're everywhere, so we really do have to watch ourselves. Okay, so how do these sugars come together? Same deal, dehydration synthesis, you see it again. So water comes off, and what's going to happen is this oxygen right here is going to hook up right there, and we're going to make this bond right here. So this bond right here is known as a glycosidic linkage. Okay, that's just the name of a bond between two sugars. All right, and once two sugars come together, such as glucose or fructose, we make a disaccharide. All right, so sucrose is table sugar. That's just your most common disaccharide. All right, these also taste sweet, so same kind of thing. There's our glycosidic linkage. Let's keep going. So most of the time, though, we're a lot of times eating complex carbohydrates. So these are the ones that don't taste sweet. This is like your starches. Okay, the starch is the main type of complex carb. So things like bread have a lot of starch in it. Potatoes, cornstarch, as you know. And these are going to give us a lot more long-term energy. Okay, so it takes time to break apart these glycosidic linkages. So that hydrolysis of this molecule is going to take a lot longer. And so we're going to feel energized for longer. So, you know, a candy bar is not a great breakfast choice, but, you know, toast or oatmeal is, because as we slowly break this down, we will slowly get this intermediate level of sugar and energy. Whereas if you just eat candy, that just gets burned straight away. You get a temporary high, and then you feel like crap all day. All right, so this is a starch right here. And so starch is stored by plants, like in potatoes, right? So that's their main energy storage molecule, okay? And the other thing they do with monomers of sugar, okay, so you see these little tiny monomers? Well, if we put them together a certain way, we make these fibers. These are called cellulose, all right? So cellulose is a big polysaccharide, and it's more commonly known as fiber. So high fiber diet, well, every single plant cell is covered by a rigid cell wall, okay? So here's our membrane, and then we have this sort of box around it. And that box is made out of fiber, and it looks like this. Okay, and it's super good for us. We actually don't absorb it. So if you're eating fiber, if you're eating vegetables, this outside area is actually 0 calories for us. That's why if you're on a diet, it's great to eat vegetables because most of it is fiber and it makes you feel full, but you do not absorb it. All right, so that's why we don't graze and we don't eat sticks and things like that, because we really can't break this down because we don't absorb it. But it's really good because it absorbs cholesterol and helps to get things moving in your gut. So that's why we eat it, and that's why it's important. Okay, now as far as animals go, before fat is made, we actually take all that those simple sugars and we convert it to glycogen. All right, so glycogen is stored in our liver and in our muscles. Okay, so glycogen, if you want to imagine it, is sort of a long kind of chain, just a big chain of sugars like that, and it goes on. So if we eat an excess of sugar, okay, so if our food has too much sugar, okay, that's going to get converted first into glycogen, then into fat. Okay, so if we don't use up this glycogen, we are going to convert it to fat. Okay, if we have too little sugar, then we're going to break that fat back down and back into the sugar that's similar to our food. Okay, so we're constantly cycling between breaking fats down and storing them up. And glycogen is kind of an intermediate point there. All right, we are going to talk about lipids and fats in the next video, so just go ahead and stop this and click over to the next video.